When we last left Rocky Ridge Farm, tensions between Wilder and Lane over the publication of Let the Hurricane Roar had gradually subsided, and by 1935, after the publication of Little House on the Prairie, both women seemed to realize that Wilder's Pioneer Girl manuscript could serve as a creative springboard for them both. At one point, Lane even had her own ambitions to write a sweeping historical series. She outlined plans to write an American novel in many volumes, an enormous canvas covering horizontally a continent. Each volume must be complete in itself, main characters in one volume appearing as subsidiary but plot essential characters in the other volumes. Let the Hurricane Roar would be the first novel in this series, but Lane abandoned the idea within just 6 months, worked on scheme of novel until overwhelmed with discouragement. Of course, by 1935, with the publication of Little House on the Prairie, it was clear that Wilder, not Lane, would write that American novel in many volumes. It was also clear by 1935 that Lane's experiment to live and write in the Missouri Ozarks wasn't working. Although she and her mother had come to terms with their parallel lives in publishing, Lane felt isolated and cut off from the publishing world. But she wasn't quite ready yet to leave Missouri behind. She received a commission to write a history of Missouri and moved to Columbia, home to the University of Missouri, where she would have access to the historical documents and materials needed to research and write the book. She lived in Columbia's Tiger Hotel, named for the university's athletic teams. Meanwhile, back on the farm, Wilder and Almanzo moved back into the farmhouse in 1936 and eventually sold the rock house. Despite the geographic distance that separated them, Wilder and Lane continued to work together, writing letters back and forth between the farmhouse at Rocky Ridge and Lane's rooms at the Tiger Hotel. This editorial correspondence between the two women provides insights into how they may have worked together on the first 3 Little House books, as well as the editorial partnership that emerged during the writing and editing of On the Banks of Plum Creek, and Lane's final pioneer novel, Free Land, which drew heavily on Wilder's Pioneer Girl manuscript. In fact, Lane took the Pioneer Girl manuscript with her to the Tiger Hotel in 1935. More about this later. Let's start with a quick overview of the working relationship we can glimpse through Wilder's and Lane's letters from the period. Like most editors, Lane urged Wilder to provide more concrete details in her manuscript, the show don't tell principle that editors and creative writing instructors continue to advocate today. Was school in the summertime, in July? What school books did they have? What did Pa wear when he dressed up? What were the dresses that grew too short, the ones they wore to school, when the boy called them long-legged snipes? I mean, what material, color, how made? Wilder wrote back right away. Our school dresses were sprigged calico made with tight waists buttoned down the back and straight skirts gathered onto the belt of the goods at the waist. Their editorial collaboration proved effective. The description of Laura and Mary's dresses struck the right creative balance, enough details so readers could visualize the scene without impeding the unfolding action. As soon as Laura and Mary had washed the breakfast dishes, they went up the ladder and put on their Sunday dresses. Mary's was a blue sprigged calico, and Laura's was red sprigged. Ma braided their hair very tight and bound the ends with thread. They could not wear their Sunday hair ribbons because they might lose them. They put on their sunbonnets, freshly washed and ironed. As editors often do, Lane suggested judicious cuts in the manuscript. In the original draft of On the Banks of Plum Creek, for example, Wilder included an episode from Pioneer Girl. Ma becomes desperately ill during the spring freshet, and Pa, too worried to leave Ma's side, sends Laura out across the footbridge to ask their neighbor to go for the doctor. When I saw the creek, it terrified me, for the footbridge was standing away out in the middle of the stream, with yellow, foamy water running on both sides, and just over the top of it. I didn't want to go on, but Pa had told me to go, and Ma was awfully sick, so I waded in. In Pioneer Girl, the neighbor, Mr. Nelson, directs Laura off the bridge, but she manages to deliver the message to the neighbor. He goes for the doctor, who arrives the next day and saves Ma's life. No wonder Wilder incorporated a fictional version of the episode into her early draft of On the Banks of Plum Creek. It was dramatic, tense, and illustrated Laura's bravery. But Lane wasn't sure about it. "I am doubtful about Ma's illness," she wrote. "It is such a wretched, miserable time, and in that kind of nasty grasshopper atmosphere. I think the grasshoppers are enough. I believe it would be better to cut out Ma's sickness altogether." But, Lane added, "the part about the creek is a pity to leave out." Wilder felt the entire episode, however, was important. I do think the picture of the two little girls doing what they did while Ma was sick, and the fact that it was nothing for a doctor to be 40 miles away and no auto, would make a great impression on children. Again, Wilder and Lane reached an editorial compromise. Ma's illness was cut from the final draft of On the Banks of Plum Creek, but Laura's confrontation with the creek remained, as we saw in the previous lecture. Lane and Wilder had creative disagreements over dialogue, plot, and character as their editorial work on the novel progressed. Lane, for example, seemed unable to grasp the geography of Plum Creek. "Get these Ozark Hills and our gorge at Rocky Ridge Farm out of your mind. The character of Plum Creek was altogether different." Wilder ended up mapping out diagrams of the town, complete with the schoolhouse, church, railroad tracks, and shops, to help Lane better visualize the setting. Wilder did the same thing for the farm at Plum Creek. Her diagrams included the dugout, stable, the new house, the tableland, the fish trap, and the road to town. As I've mentioned before, Lane was an unusually aggressive editor, but her editorial observations often pushed Wilder to do better work and to think consistently about such issues as voice and point of view. The scene toward the end of On the Banks of Plum Creek, when Ma goes out to do the chores during a long blizzard while Pa is away, proved especially challenging for Wilder. In the original draft, she abandoned the third-person limited point of view to convey this episode. As we'll see later on, Wilder does this at crucial points in the series, but Lane felt it was a mistake in On the Banks of Plum Creek. It simply wasn't effective for the scene to be written from Ma's point of view, not Laura's. Lane suggested that Laura do the chores with Ma. Wilder initially agreed, but then the working writer in her took over. Logistically, it didn't make sense for Laura to do the chores with Ma. Laura was too small to reach the clothesline that guided them to the stable in the blizzard. And more importantly, Ma would never agree to endanger one of the girls in this way. It might be that Laura could follow Ma into the barn and doing the chores with her imagination. Having seen Pa do the chores, she would know how they would be done and how the animals would act. This, of course, is how the scene unfolds in the published version of On the Banks of Plum Creek. Laura ran to the darkened window, but she could not see Ma. She could see nothing but the whirling whiteness swishing against the glass. Ma would go step by step, holding tight to the clothesline. She would come to the post and go on, blind in the hard snow, whirling and scratching her cheeks. Laura tried to think slowly, one step at a time, till now, surely, Ma bumped against the stable door. Notice that the scene unfolds from Laura's point of view, but she imagines the episode so vividly that she, and by extension Wilder's readers, see Ma's every step. Wilder at once maintains the third-person limited narrative through Laura and moves beyond it. This is a brilliant solution to a creatively challenging problem, and it illustrates the unique creative and editorial strengths that Wilder and Lane brought to the Little House series. Lane could identify technical issues with craft, voice, point of view, plot, but Wilder, with her deeper understanding of her characters and their motivations, was able to find creative solutions that maintained the integrity of those characters and their stories. But what about the history behind On the Banks of Plum Creek? What about those grasshoppers?